So what do we think of when the word cult comes to mind? Brainwashed followers, mindless zombies, charismatic con artists who are out to take your money. I mean, we don't usually think of the Baptist church down the street or our Catholic grandmothers. The word cult itself carries negative connotations. It's just not neutral. And for this reason, scholars of religions, or new religions, have tried to come up with a number of alternatives to the word cult. Alternative religions, unconventional religions, new religious movements, or NRMs, new religions. There's no single term that's quite adequate, however. Alternative to what? Unconventional by whose standards? New in what sense? For example, many new religions in California are old in their home environments. We have only to think about Hare Krishna, or more formally, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, which was new to the United States in the 1960s when Swami Prabhupada brought it here. But in India, in its home setting, it's centuries old. Their Krishna devotion and Krishna consciousness has been part of that culture for eons. Well, that might be a slight exaggeration. So it's important to get the terminology right when we're looking at religion in California because of its diversity. It's really neither accurate nor appropriate to call a religion that we don't understand or don't know much about a cult. So I'd like to use this time to introduce a few terms that were developed by Eileen Barker, who's a sociologist of religion at the London School of Economics. She's retired now, but she studied new religious movements for more than 3 decades. And she's come up with a couple of helpful ways to discuss what I'm going to call new religious movements or new religions. She begins by introducing the difference between primary and secondary constructions of reality. A primary construction of reality would be reality as it is. Now, when we look at religions, we would say, well, what does the religion say about itself? What do Muslims say about Islam? What do rabbis say about Judaism? The scholarly way of saying that might be to call it the emic perspective. What is the perspective of insiders? What are they saying about themselves? A secondary construction of reality is what other people are saying about the group or the event or the issue. What do reporters say about Scientology? What do scholars say about Christian Science? And I've given you 2 new religions with science in the title, but they're very different. So the academic way of describing these secondary constructions of reality is the etic view, right? That's what outsiders are saying about these groups. A personal example might be to consider myself, right? I have my own worldview, my own understanding of who I am, what my identity is. That's very different from the secondary constructions of reality about me that might say, oh yeah, she's a teacher, she's a wife, she does Zumba, all sorts of different constructions that may or may not be the way I see myself. So when we think about new religions, it gets even more complicated because there are many actors involved in making judgments about them. Eileen Barker comes up with 6 different worldviews by which she identifies the ways that people are looking at these new religions. So I'm going to go through these 6 worldviews. The first is the new religion itself. And again, we might call that the primary construction of reality. What do members of the 12 tribes say about themselves? What do members of the Family International say, and how do they understand themselves? What would a member of Falun Gong say about that group, or a devotee of Satya Sai Baba? What would these people say about what their beliefs and practices are? Now, outsiders might say, well, whatever they say is propaganda. But propaganda, like cult, is not a neutral term. We have to take seriously what people are saying about themselves. The second worldview that Barker identifies is that of the anti-cult movement, or the ACM. Anti-cult movement began pretty much in the 60s and 70s from family members and parents who saw their children, these were adult children, but children nonetheless, joining new religions, selling flowers on street corners, handing out tracts in airport, and they didn't understand why would they give up a career in law to be on a hippie commune in the Central Valley. So the anti-cult movement was founded by people in opposition to new religions. And they understood their children's membership by way of brainwashing. That was the only way they could explain to themselves why would they give up all these middle-class privileges. Brainwashing, like propaganda and cult, is not a neutral term either, right? These are all value-laden terms. A third world view is that of the news media. In other words, journalists are covering new religions, but they only cover new religions if they exceed a threshold of newsworthiness. In other words, the news media is not going to cover the Rastafarians and the Nation of Islam who were joining with, the Methodists and Lutherans on the beach cleanup after the 4th of July. It's only if the group does something extraordinary, and that really has to be extraordinarily bad, for the news media to cover it. Now, when we think about where people get their information about new religions, it's quite clear that if we only read bad news about new religions, we're going to paint them all with the same brush, right? They're all crazy cultists and they're dangerous. A fourth worldview is that of law enforcement, and I would add, of course, the justice system to that. Like the news media, people in law enforcement and in the courts really encounter new religions only in situations of conflict. Criminal behavior, child custody suits, lawsuits in terms of people trying to recover assets that they donated to a particular religion. So the worldview of law enforcement is rather jaundiced because they're only seeing people in conflict and crisis. And that's similar to the fifth worldview, that of the therapeutic worldview. Counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers, and others only see individuals who come to them because they've said, I had a problem, I was hurt, I was injured by my involvement in this new religion, I need help. Well, we can see that if the only people you see coming out of a new religion is someone who's messed up, you also are going to be rather critical of new religions. The sixth worldview is that of the scholars of new religions, and of course we like to think that we're objective and unbiased and bring a neutral perspective to the subject matter. That may or may not be the case, but certainly scholars of new religions look at groups in aggregate. What does the group, how does the group appear? What do they say about themselves? Rather than the therapeutic, which is looking at individuals within a particular group. I hope that it's clear by now that when we hear the word cult, we should think about a number of things. Who's saying this? What's their worldview? Are there other points of view as we should consider as we think about this group? What's our own worldview? What are our own biases about various religions? These questions really are crucial for investigating the rich diversity of religions in California. If we want to respect California's religious pluralism, we might even want to think about dropping the word cult entirely. Like propaganda, like brainwashing, the word cult is value-laden. It's something we always say about the other guy, the other religion, right? We don't use propaganda. We're not involved in brainwashing. We're not cultists, right? It's only somebody else, which is why all of those terms are problematic. Cult is literally a four-letter word. And we don't use four-letter words when we're trying to be respectful, especially when we're discussing religious diversity in California. Thank you for listening.